Hey guys, I'm just here at Elemental hanging out with a good friend of mine, Michael Sanders. We're going to be hanging out today. We're going to do a podcast. It's going to be free flowing, so we may jump in the sauna, jump in the ice bath, chill on the Big Joes, and just chat about life, about some of the things that Mike's up to, and some of the things that I'm super passionate about as well. So stay tuned. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, man.
So I guess just for those listening in, again, this is Michael Sanders. Very, very interesting guy. I think so anyways. To many people. We met a couple years ago when he was in the process of launching his first book. At the time, I was working with a website, and he had reached out, or somehow we got connected. And I was actually looking for someone to interview who is more an entrepreneur or like in the business world, and our paths just met synchronistically. But yeah, why don't you tell us a bit about who you are and a bit about your backstory and what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah, that was actually 5 years ago. 5 years? That we met.
Feels like a lifetime.
I was at the time, I was writing I think I'd probably already written it, my book, Ayahuasca and Executive's Enlightenment. And I wanted to help get exposure for it, and then serendipitously you said you were looking to interview an entrepreneur who had familiarity with plant medicines, particularly ayahuasca, for your documentary, and Psyched Out, which ended up coming out. I mean, that was like 2019 or 2018 that it came out?
We actually released it at the end of 2018. Yeah, it's just been on YouTube for free, so it's actually going to be listed on Gaia this month. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
It's an amazing movie, by the way. And my life really revolves around play. So I rather than perceiving anything as an obligation or something that I need to do, I recognize that everything we do is a choice. And just a simple analogy I like to make is with respect to taking out the trash. It's like I could perceive that as, I have to take out the trash. Or I could think of it as, I get to take out the garbage to enhance the vibe of my house. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes a playful experience, I find, because it's something I'm doing for enjoyment. And so I start every day with play, like a very obvious form of play that then helps shift or helps me adopt the mindset of having a playful day. So I'll wake up and I meditate for a bit each morning, and then I'll play with movement. Whether it's like this morning I did gymnastic, like I have rings hanging in my house, so I was doing gymnastic strength training, or I'll weightlift, or I'll dance. My house is set up so that like the main room is like beautiful empty space for dancing, or I'll do hand balancing or yoga, just some squash, like some form of movement. And then I go into my office where I'm a co-founder and the chief storyteller of a company called Horizon Blockchain Games. So we're pioneering a new dimension of gaming that belongs to its players and creators, and our ethos is really about co-creating a reality that's open, inclusive, loving, fair, and transparent, where everyone's empowered to create, contribute, and affect positive growth. And how we're doing that is through a video game called Skyweaver, in which the game items, so it's a trading card game like Pokemon, if you're familiar with that, but a digital format, and the cards themselves are in fact cryptocurrencies. So this means that...
So will they go up in value?
They could potentially, yeah. Some of the items, some of the rarer cosmetic items. But it's really cool because you can play the game for free, and by being skilled at the game, you can win and unlock new cards that become your property. And you can sell these items, you can play with them, you can trade them. We supply a wallet as well, currently called Arcadium. Because like right now, gamers spend $32 billion a year in traditional video games on items like cards, swords, costumes, whatever. And they don't actually own any of those items. They pay for them, but they can't trade them, they can't sell them. A lot of games, if you try to even sell your account to somebody else, the game publisher will ban your account if they find out that you did that. So it's really like there's no ownership, and we just think that this model's antiquated. Like if you pay for something, you should own it. So we're enabling that. And so by playing a free-to-play game, you could actually not only just have a ton of fun playing it, but you could actually earn something of value that you could then use to you could, let's say, buy items in other games, or you could convert that into like Canadian dollars or whatever, or wherever you're from, and then pay for your rent or go on a trip or whatever, right? And that's kind of the first phase of it. But I think that new dimension is going to expand in ways that we're just beginning to imagine, and it's really exciting.
Awesome. So how did you get into that kind of stuff? Like, you know, like when I met you, you were involved, I think, in a power company. You just left an advertising company, an advertising executive. Yeah, so what did that journey look like for you? And to, you know, you seem super happy now. You're doing something you're passionate about. I think from what I understand from you, it took you a while just trying to find out what you really wanted to do after you left the advertising agency. Yeah. You want to give us a backstory of like hitting that point of needing a change desperately in your life, and then finding plant medicine, making some other changes, dancing, playing,
Yeah. So at the start of 2013, I was working as the vice president of an advertising agency. I was the co-founder of a startup in the gambling industry. Not even into gambling, but not that I have anything against it, but like I was just, you know, it seemed like a good business idea, but not really like true to my heart. And at that time I was training athletically and intensely about 14 times per week. I was trying to achieve a 1-arm handstand, a 1-arm chin-up, a 400-pound squat. I was trying to service my advertising clients. I was trying to build this startup. I was never resting, never relaxing, no yoga, no meditation. I didn't take a single day off for 20 consecutive months. And I just thought that if I ever felt tired, that was an indication that I wasn't working hard enough. Because if I had been working hard enough, then I would have the capacity to be able to handle the load that was making me tired. So me being tired was a sign of weakness, is how I perceived it back then.
So was there like I guess now in retrospect, like that type of mentality and work habit, because that's like a product of like your youth or growing up, or like finding worth in like how did you get to that point? Was there something that was driving you?
I think
a lot of people get there and they don't know why. Like, it's a very similar story here all the time. It's like just like pushed to the brink, like expectations from parents, or like wanting to like prove yourself, or feeling like self-worth through like output.
I mean, my parents never put that kind of pressure on me. You know, like they were very loving and supportive and encouraging of anything that I found interest in. But I just always knew that I wanted to do something great, and I think maybe it wasn't exactly in the domains that I was focusing on, but that I thought like maybe if I just like push hard enough at this, I can find the greatness that's there, you know. And I wasn't finding it, so I'm like, okay, like maybe just work harder, and then you'll achieve that like massive breakthrough that's going to have a big impact, you know. And yeah, I think kind of my soul was yearning for something else and something more, but I wasn't quiet enough to listen to it. So I just thought like just power harder in the same direction. And it ultimately reached a breaking point, because for a number of months I felt exhausted. Like I just, you know, I was sleeping 10 hours each night, and the sound of my alarm clock in the morning felt like a sick joke. Like it felt as though I just shut my eyes and then I was having to wake up. My legs felt heavy. I was 26 and I wasn't getting boners anymore. And the real breaking point came on February 2nd, 2013. I was making love with a beautiful woman that I had wanted to have that experience with for a while, and I couldn't get a boner. And I was like, this is fucked. I'm 26, you know? And then that day afterwards, I went to go to the gym, and I wanted to lift this one weight, like 5 sets of 5 reps, so 25 reps total. I couldn't lift it even once. And so I had been experiencing symptoms, but I was kind of in denial. I'm like, oh, just keep working harder. But that day was a sign like, okay, dude, something is seriously like wrong right now. You don't feel like yourself. And I actually resolved at that moment. I'm like, I'm going to put a bullet in my brain if I can't figure out how to feel like myself again with it. And then I gave myself a 2-year timeline. I'm like, you have 2 years to figure this out, you know? And so the next day I went and consulted with this guy named Lovedeep, a natural health practitioner, and he got me to focus on play. Like, that was the big thing. He's like, Michael, he's like, okay, clearly you love movement. Like, you're doing all this stuff like 14 times per week. He's like, but he's like, are you ever playing? He's like, why did you get into it in the first place? I'm like, because it's a lot of fun, and it's fun to move your body, you know? And he's like, okay. He's like, well, let's like focus on play. So rather than being so goal oriented, try things that don't have a goal, and also like scale back how much you work out to like 5 days a week instead of 14. And so, you know, that's when I started paying more attention to dancing and things like rock climbing, and just like doing it for the sake of enjoyment rather than needing to achieve something in particular. And then I developed a daily meditation practice, and within about the span of 4 months, I started feeling like myself again, because he really encouraged me. He's like, you don't need to figure it all out today. Just start heading in the right direction, and as long as tomorrow you feel a little bit better than today, then like you're already healed, you know, you're on that trajectory. So yeah, within a few months, felt good again. It was tough, but like I knew where I was going. And then I ended up at Burning Man for the first time, which just, you know, changed my life forever. I've been there 5 times now since. And but then after returning from Burning Man is when I went down to the Peruvian Amazon and drank ayahuasca, which that shattered my previous paradigm of reality and showed me something so far beyond my wildest imagination that now informs my entire way of being, and is ultimately the reason why you and I met as well.
Yeah, it's interesting once you see like all the connections that certain things sort of make in your life, and you can you know, like bring them back to like some very specific points. Like this place is one of them for me. Like the whole process of opening Elemental was like so arduous. There's so many times I doubted myself. There's so many times where it's like I may never make money here, but that wasn't the intention. The intention was to create a space that I loved working in every day, that I can help people and make it sustainable, so I can create an income to support the place and support myself, and then like have a community around it. It wasn't like to get super rich or like maximize profits. Open 100 of them. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll open more, but we're thinking about it right now, actually. But when I look at all the things that came out of this place, like other opportunities, like teaching opportunities, networking opportunities, like just meeting like cool people that have come through here, it's like it's paid itself 1,000,000 times over, right?
Of course, man.
And ayahuasca is another one for me. Like doing ayahuasca, creating that sort of thread where it opens you up to meet other people, like in that space that can sort of have a different understanding of what that's like, and just so many things. Like for us, like that was one of them, right? And I guess around that question is, what was your experience with psychedelics before you had done ayahuasca, and then how was ayahuasca different and changing?
Yeah, it was. I mean, so I started experimenting with psychedelics when I was 14 years old with marijuana. But you know, I didn't classify it as a psychedelic. I guess the first like psychedelic, at least how I perceived it back then, was when I was 16 and I ate magic mushrooms, and that was one of the defining moments of my life. It showed me the interconnectedness of all things, and I was in a horse pasture, and I like pressed my forehead to the forehead of a horse, and we connected third eyes. I didn't know that terminology back then, but I just felt that we were one, and we were communicating, and we were synced with the stars and the clouds and the trees and the grass, and that was, it was magical. And then I had a number of experiences with mushrooms and LSD and MDMA, and all of them were incredibly enriching. Like oftentimes they were my favorite experiences, you know, like true presence and that interconnection. But none of them, I never did any of them in like a ceremonial context. They were all a bit more recreational. And then ayahuasca was the first like ceremonial experience where I prepared for it for, I mean, now I think my whole life is what I was preparing for, but like knowingly 3 months. And I was kind of like setting the intention for 3 months, like entering into the ayahuasca diet, not for the 3 months, but like for 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, but just knowing I was going there, and you know, meditating with the expectation of I am going down here, and everything leading into it. And then that intention and commitment and respect to the plant medicine really yielded wonderful results. I think just her, like Mother Ayahuasca's, she was just very appreciative of me showing her that much respect.
And what would you say changed after? So you went in, you were still sort of figuring out this play thing. Were you still sort of like depressed or anxious?
No, I was feeling great. By the time I went in, like I was just like, I was on cloud 9 already. And then But my intentions during my first ceremony were to gain some more clarity on my life's path, because I enjoyed advertising, but I knew it wasn't the be all and end all for me. And that gambling startup, it wasn't really getting off the ground, So I was like asking, is it a fear I need to overcome? Like, do I need to push harder and make this thing happen, or is it my intuition telling me that this project isn't right for me? And ayahuasca revealed to me that it was the latter. I guess I won't go into like the full details of the ayahuasca ceremony now, because I've talked about it a lot, but I mean, there were like beings of other dimensional beings of just infinite kind. Ikaro singing, and like
I remember that from editing the documentary so many times. You said it so well.
Yeah, and like and all of these beings were each articulating some aspect of love, collectively communicating love as a whole, and revealing to me, helping me remember that the fabric of our universe is love, that it's the creative force behind all things, responsible for the Big Bang and every one of its predecessors, galaxies being born, like children being born, art, business, like all of it is love. And that really instilled me with a deep sense of peace, just knowing like this existence, all of it is like a creative expression of love. And it really took away any of the pressure to do anything. And that's when I like fully embodied the play mindset and soul set, that like just play like this. That's have fun and enjoy the experience. There's nothing that needs to be done. It's just about enjoyment. And I guess kind of touching back on one of your earlier questions is like how that tied in with blockchain and everything, is that I got interested in cryptocurrency and blockchain back in 2010 when I first started Bitcoin, this decentralized currency that was not controlled by any central authority, which I found incredibly promising, especially at that time. I
remember you telling me about it like in 2017. You're like, hey, like you should put some money in, or like look at this. It's really interesting, like to support, because you knew what I was into, and I was like, I don't know anything about it, but I'm just gonna take Michael Sanders' advice. And I just bought a few coins, and just like I've been holding on to it ever since. But I did see like not only a good return on my investment, but it opened my eyes to like that whole world of like cryptography, blockchain, and storing value outside of like the centralized system.
Sure. And it goes even further, I think, with like the Ethereum blockchain, is that it's programmatic, and you can create other applications rather than just a currency. And but yeah, I saw such promise in those technologies back then. I just saw them as like having such incredible potential for like real liberation from archaic economic structures, political, socio-cultural, where rather than us needing to entrust a small few, it's just distributed, and decision making and ownership is distributed, and power. Like it's really enabling greater equal opportunity.
Do you think one day there'll be a blockchain for like politics and like voting, where like people can like put a vote in and like know that it's sort of like fair and real, and that like a decision, like once pretty much someone's in politics, they have so much say in what happens, whereas like everything that comes up to, okay, let's get everyone to sort of like chime in with technology and like and blockchain. Do you think that's a potential?
I do, yeah. I definitely think it's a potential in terms of governance and and like seeing things through, and with smart contracts you can ensure that particular results are achieved before other initiatives occur. So if there's some sort of payment mechanism, for example, like until a predetermined goal is achieved, only then will the money be unlocked, right? And you can't manipulate that. So it ensures that you follow through on your promises. Whereas, in today's government, I'm sure there are many people trying their best, but it could obviously be a lot better. And
so in one of those contracts, how does someone verify that something has happened?
Well, I mean, there's a number of different ways. It could be like the ideal scenario is a decentralized oracle, which we're still working on. Like, I mean, not necessarily me in particular, but people working on the Ethereum blockchain, where the oracle would be able to determine whether or not something had been met, and then the smart contract would execute. Right now, there's different
mechanisms. Is it like an AI type thing?
Could be, yeah. Or pre-programmatic. And yeah, like I think one of the most exciting things about blockchain is like how nascent it is. It's only 10 years old, and it's already seeing the potential for it. And that's where like we really want to come in at Horizon. Is a lot of it might sound or seem esoteric to a number of people, and it's technically advanced, and it's quite challenging to wield blockchain technologies. Like they're cumbersome. There's asynchronous data. They're not easy to use, right? And so we want to just abstract all of that difficulty away and just say, like, here's a game, and you just play it, and it just, for the record, like, it's a fun video. We want it to stand on its own, even if there were no blockchain in it. Like, it's just a really fun game. And then people will be like, they'll own the Sky Reaver cards, and
that's where the blockchain comes in. It's the ownership.
The ownership, yeah.
And so you make sure that it's like encrypted ownership.
Yeah. I mean, it's in their wallet. Like it's not in ours. We can't even access it.
So it's the same ideology or philosophy as like crypto coins as a store of value, but putting them into the game.
Exactly.
Do you think those will ever be traded on like an exchange or something like that? Or do you think traded within the game? For
sure. Like we have a decentralized exchange that we've built into the game. So it's like just you can trade with other players.
Inside the game has its own exchange.
Inside the game. But then there are also other decentralized exchanges, like one called OpenSea, and there are more and more coming online. But yeah, you can just go on OpenSea and you can trade your cards there as well.
Cool.
So that's what's really cool is like, our 3 company values are love, openness, and play. And with respect to openness, it's this concept that the world in collaboration can achieve and create far more than any individual entity could.
And I think it's a good like entry point for people to see how it works. To play, it's not a huge there's no risk really involved.
No, you don't have to pay anything.
But once you get comfortable with that, then you can see how it can bleed or like transmute into other applications. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Once they see that, get familiar with using it in the game.
Yeah, and the way like I often look at it is, very few people in the world understand what the HTTP protocol of the internet is. Like before your web address it says HTTP, and like very few people understand how that works, right? But virtually everyone knows how to use the internet, and they're using it every single day of their lives. And the applications that now exist that are connected to the internet would have been unfathomable 20 years ago. Like think of Uber Eats or just Uber or Airbnb, like sharing our resources. Like that wasn't a thing. And similarly, I think with blockchain, we're like very early days, and what will come from it. We hope to inspire a lot of that creativity through fun and through play.
Amazing. Yeah, one podcast that I've been really into lately is Starting Greatness with Mike Maples.
Oh yeah, I listened to that one too.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah. It just shows all these startups and like all of the pivots they've had to make, and sort of listening and feedback and just adapting. And these are some of the biggest companies, and they're all like mainly tech-based companies. And the internet has allowed that, and it's allowed this really exponential growth into new spaces, like you said, like using resources and like it's like another dimension to life almost. It's like another like sense in reality. It's like it's like the 6th or 7th sense. It's like the internet, where it's just like it's not anything real and tangible, but it exists in everyone's life. Totally. And it's this connecting force. Let's change gears a bit. What about like talking about some of your like, and you're kind of psychonaut as well, like some of like the most profound like psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
Is there one that stands out among them?
Yeah, it was actually in December.
This year?
Yeah. My girlfriend and I went to Tulum, Mexico, and we were staying at our friend's place in the jungle, like totally off grid, no electricity, doesn't even have a fridge, and it's in the jungle right on the ocean. So like the ocean's just like lapping in, and this beautiful deck. Like it's essentially a hut with like concrete floors, so it's like a permanent fixture, but thatch roofing. And there were a number of our friends there, maybe like 8 in total. And I think the first day we arrived, we went on this LSD journey, and my girlfriend and I, she often, I've seen in psychedelic experiences before, she starts like playing with something, over here, and like it's definitely she's interacting with something, right? Like she's not just moving her hand. And I started looking at it, and then I could see what she was playing with, and it was this like translucent, very multicolored, like iridescent sort of plasma. And it was like the fabric of reality, sort of thing, of three-dimensional reality. And I could see her hand like manipulating it and like impacting it. And then I felt our consciousness like starting to connect, and she kept like moving, and I could see in her consciousness she was like, oh, I think you can see what I'm doing right now. And then I was like, I'm like, why does she only think that I can see? Like, how does she not know that I can see, right? I'm like, I must not be making it obvious enough. So then I thought, okay, well, how do we make it more obvious? And we weren't speaking words. And then our consciousness started coming like closer and closer together. And like there was less sense of individuality and more into this merging. And it was as though I was looking down this like tunnel almost, but not with my eyes, like with I don't know what form of awareness, but I could see this tunnel almost like this vignette, like in a tunnel, and I could see these like two figures. And then I was coming closer and closer to her, and like she was coming closer and closer to me, and then we were almost like fully merged, where there was only, it was close to it being one entity and not two. And then I just had this realization, if I go any further, that might be it. Like I don't know what's happening after that. You know, I don't know if there's a return. I don't know what will happen. And I was very ready to do that, especially with her. You know, she is the most important person in the world to me, and just absolutely miraculous being. And so I surrendered into that, and then we merged, and immediately, man, the deepest sobbing, like full release of sobbing. Like I've been with you where I've seen you fully release into laughter, like a deep, deep laughter, right? And this was like the equivalent, I would say, of like in a sobbing way, but equally wonderful. It's not like the sobbing isn't a bad thing. It's like a full release, and we were one thing, and there was no we anymore. It was just one, and I'll use these terms interchangeably, but just had this realization of being so deeply humble that I had ever thought I had known anything prior to this. You know, any notion I thought I had of something.
It's so interesting. Like, people think the more you do psychedelics, you get answers. I just think you get more questions. It's like, you know less and less. And like, it's like, okay, wow. Like, my beliefs before were so limiting. Just to think that I could answer a question, like an existential question. It's just like, no, like, I know nothing about anything. So it was really humbling, and that's where like a lot of the tears were. And then, dude, it's crazy. There's one, like, I'll just, for the sake of conversation, I'll call it a head. And I could see, like, it was like both of us were in this head, this dome. And we could see out in all directions, but we could also see inwards in all directions. And I could see through her eyes, and she could see through my eyes, and then I could see through my own, and she could see through her own. And it was as though we were like the consciousness that was controlling this vehicle of some sort. And also, just for the in the physical space, like what we were doing going into it is we were coming closer and closer. Like our faces were like this far apart. But I mean, I'm convinced that if someone else were to have walked into the room, our physical heads were like in the same place at the same time. And like it seems impossible in the third dimension, but I also think that's probably why no one walked in, is that it was like beyond space and time. And did I ever tell you that I dream about you guys in a room where you guys were like sitting and like you guys were like I told you that, right?
Yeah, you did, man. And and when we do that a lot, we just like look at each other for a long time. Sometimes one time was 8 hours straight.
But I've never really hung out with you guys in that context, like to know that.
No, I know. Yeah, you just told me you had the dream, and I was laughing. I'm like, yeah, we do that all the time. And but yeah, in that space, man. And then it was very interesting because the consciousness, like, all was going through these contemplations of like life and death. And then any question that arose, it was like immediately absorbed into the all. It was like, yep, that's part of it. Like, yep, that's part of it. Like, what about death? Like, what about this? And it was like, yep, that's part of the all. Like, yep. And there was like nothing bad or good. It was just all part of it. And it was interesting though, like when we would contemplate the death of ourselves or one another, the faces that we could see from this, they would immediately, like, they'd frown. Like, wow. Physical faces. And then when we'd think like, but it's okay because nothing ever ends. It just changes form, and like you're always together. It's all one anyway. And then the faces would smile, and it was almost like marionettes, like controlling these things. And we were both merged in this space together. And it wasn't just us either, though. It wasn't just two people. It was like the all consciousness experiencing it for everyone. And that was, and then.
Do you think LSD is more prone to these types of journeys where you can really explore consciousness more, I guess, actively rather than like feel like ayahuasca? Mm-hmm. Well, I guess more ayahuasca now for me because I have a lot more experience. This is less of me getting taken for a ride where I can interact with it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Like, do you think there's any difference there as far as like the experience itself and like navigating? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I do. I think. Well, yeah, just as an example, like with 5-MeO might be the easiest to compare it to, where it kind of feels like you're just taken for a ride. Or you're taken to no ride. Or like NDMT, right? Like you're just taken on this ride through the infinite cosmos, all these other dimensions.
Shit, yeah.
And then and LSD, it onsets more slowly, that's for sure, right? Like, I guess I've always found...
like on this journey here, like, dose that you took, roughly?
Yeah. It was like 1.3 tab. Like it was probably...
A tab's like what, 120 micrograms?
Something like that. So it's probably like 150 micrograms.
Okay, so that's super crazy, but
no.
It's... And
like I've done a lot more in the past. That's the thing, like I never have found psychedelics to be dose dependent.
Yeah.
I always see it as an invitation, and then you're set and set.
Yeah, like I think there's a certain amount you need to get past
right.
that like threshold, but then after that, it's like 150 can be more profound than like a 300, depending on the setting, where you at, what energy is like flowing through you, the space you're in.
Yeah, exactly. And then afterwards, my girlfriend gave me just like literally the most special physical gift I've ever been given, and I guess I'm just being sensitive to saying her name and the details of the gift since this will be public and I don't want to implicate, so I won't go into that. But it was just like really special because it was like this merging, and then she gave me something that just like on the deepest level showed me how much she knows me, even though I already knew she like that, but it was just like such a beautiful expression and so sweet. And but yeah, it was like being in the oneness of all with someone, right? Because I've had the experience where like on my own, fully surrendered with God or with one or with all, but then this was like finding that by merging with another human.
It's interesting because that opens a whole other dimension of awareness that is possible, because sometimes in these trips you're like, is it just me?
Right.
Am I just like hallucinating?
Yeah.
Like it feels like I'm having this immersive experience and connecting with like all that is. But when you do it with another, it's like, okay, wow, we can both tap into this. So it makes it a lot more like real. Definitely. In a sense. Real is a good word for it. But yeah, that's super interesting. What about like bad trips? Have you ever had like a really like terrifying trip? I don't like the word bad trips. I think they're all good. Yeah. Like they all have lessons and learning from it.
For sure.
Any like terrifying trips?
Yeah,
that really stood out?
The only one that I ever at any point called a bad trip was when I was, because like you, I think those bad trips are necessary and they actually teach you something, and then you're kind of purging that darkness or overcoming something. But it was when I was I think 17 or 18 years old, and it was a mushroom trip in which I was so this was like 15 years ago, and I was already like high for marijuana, and I'd been drinking. I was at a high school party, and I ended up eating like 0.5 of a gram of mushrooms, and my friend didn't even want to give it to me. Like a few of my friends had already gone on a full journey, like they were coming down the tail end, and I was I was telepathic with my friend Nick at the time, and we were telepathically communicating, and we were saying like, hey, watch, like that person over there is going to like set their beer down there and then go talk to this girl, and then that girl's going to laugh, and then she's going to go grab her friend. And we were telepathically saying this, and we watched it all unfold, and then we were thinking, okay, are we controlling it, or are we predicting it? Like, how much agency do we have in this experience, or are we just observing it? And then, because he was on mushrooms, I thought to myself, oh, I want to get on your level, so I'm going to take the mushrooms. Not realizing, obviously, I already was on his level if we were having that experience together. So then I took this, my friend Greg was like, I don't want to give this to you, I think it's a bad idea. And I was like, dude, just give me you have a whole bunch, like what's the problem? You know, I'm like, I'll pay you for it if you want. He's like, it's not about that, man. And he didn't even know why he was resistant, you know. He told me after the fact, he's like, I just had this bad feeling, you know. And then so eventually I convinced him to give me this half gram, which is like, for those who haven't done it, for a lot of people it seemed like a negligible amount, you know, or especially if it's your first time. Like some people will microdose with that or less now because they have an awareness with it, but it's certainly wouldn't be typically considered like a psychedelic experience. And I ate it, and then next thing I knew, I was being dropped off in my driveway at home when I lived at my parents' house back then. And I don't remember the drive home, but I was in my driveway, and I looked at my house, which like I grew up loving, but in that moment, this voice just entered my awareness saying, "Do not walk into that burning inferno." And I was like, okay, but where else am I going to go? It's like 2 a.m, you know? And so I knew I was going into it. Like I knew I'm going to enter this inferno. It's pretty fucked, you know, pretty ominous. And I walk in, and then I just felt this voice saying, "Do not look at the mirror." I don't know, well, obviously I'm going to look at the mirror, you know, tell me that. And like, I look at the mirror in my parents' house, and the reflection is me, and behind me this wall of sand that's just like falling. It's like the illusion of the third dimension of physicality is just dissolving. And then there was these, I didn't know this, I didn't know what Sanskrit was, but there was this Sanskrit word written in the sand as it was like falling. And then I would like turn to look, and I would just see the door, because like that's what it was there. But then I'd look in the mirror, and I could see that. And I was like, fuck. And then, I mean, what ended up happening is I kind of started feeling like very afraid, very anxious, and then realizing that I was the sole existing being in the universe, and that all things were a figment of my imagination. And then I was like, fuck, I don't want that to be true, so I went to go wake up my mom. And I knew where she would be. I'm like, oh, I know she's going to be on the couch, and she's going to be asleep, because I started having this more omnipresent form of awareness that was more than just Michael's physical awareness. And so I could see where she was. So I walk in, and I go to wake her up, and I can't wake her up. So I think like, oh, now that I know my mom is just a manifestation of what my imagination thinks a mom should be, I can no longer enliven her because the illusion is over. And so I'm shaking her, she's not waking up. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go find my dad. And like I run down to the basement, and I know he's gonna be on the couch, and I know that when I go to wake him up, that he's gonna jump, he's gonna be startled, and that my brother, who's also sitting down there, he's gonna start laughing his head off. And it just happened on cue, and I'm like, fuck. Like, it was terrifying, because I'm like, I know that this is happening. And so it felt as though I was governing all of it. And that made me feel so alone and isolated. And I ended up like, I would turn my head to the left, and I would be up in my bedroom, which required in the physical dimension 3 flights of stairs, but I wouldn't need to climb them. Like I just turn my head to the left, and I'd be in my bedroom. And I turn my head to the right, and I'd be in the basement. And so 3D was no longer my...
So it sounds like you were experiencing sort of like what appeared to be like psychosis. Like reality was just like dissolving, and like you didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And it lasted for...
probably like 4 hours, but I had no sense of time.
Yeah. It must have felt like forever.
Oh, it was eternity. Like, and I remember even saying to my mom, I felt like I felt like a combination of the Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
I love both those movies.
And Jim Carrey's in both of them, so it's really tripping me out. And it's so funny because the next...
We have such a similar taste in like movies that we love, eh?
Yeah, it makes sense. It was funny because I go through this whole experience. Eventually, my dad like realizes, because he gets out of me that I'm on mushrooms, and like I had been trying to tell him, but so anyway, the next morning I say to my mom, I'm like, Mom, like I remember like I was in your bathroom, like I was sobbing, and I was like, Mom, like help me, I'm on mushrooms, like I was talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and the Truman Show, and my mom was like, and I'm like, and I said to my mom, like, all you did was laugh at me, and I knew you were gonna laugh at me, so it was like torturing. And she's like, Mike, she's like, from my perspective, you came into my room like, Jim Carrey, blah, blah, blah. And like, that was her experience. And so I thought I was articulating everything to her, but I was like mumbling.
So what was your takeaway after that whole experience? Like,
well, at the time, it was never to do mushrooms again, because it was like...
And in retrospect, did you gain anything?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Any insights? Yeah.
Well, I mean, now, like, in some sense, I feel as though we all are the sole existing being in the universe. So it helped me tap into the fact that we are the architects of reality. Each of us is, right? And I think we're all aspects of one consciousness. And because, like, now I have experiences all the time, not even just through psychedelics, but meditation, dance, just being here thinking, meditating, that we are that. And we get to create reality.
Yeah.
And so what was terrifying back then, I think I was terrified of the responsibility back then. I was like, oh shit, you're responsible for everything in your life and everything in existence.
And it manifested that in a way that was trying to like wake you up a little bit to
Yeah.
that reality. How important do you think it is for people to try to unpack their bad experiences? Because I know most people that have a bad experience try to like push it back down and like forget about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I'm sure you've had, since then, as a psychonaut, some pretty intense, scary experiences.
Yeah.
And I know you can navigate them much better now. Like, I think I remember you once telling me about an experience where you sort of shifted another reality where you had like a mask on and like you're like a breathing apparatus or beings.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're like, just put it back on, go back to sleep sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was like you were breaking out the Matrix.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, well... Yeah, I mean, now there's no fear going into the psychedelic experiences. Like, I don't really... I experience choice now and discernment, but I don't experience fear. Because, like, sometimes there are entities that I encounter on psychedelic experiences where I'm like, I don't really want to engage with you, and I'll just send it love. I'm like, I love you, but I'm just not feeling that in this moment. But in terms of, like, unpacking... I mean, personally, man, I think it's essential. Like, I would not be... And I don't think it's just psychedelic experience. It's, like, traumatic experiences.
Any experience, really.
Any experience.
Reflect on it.
Yeah, like, reflect on it. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? How is it going to help you? Because if you don't, like, you end up suppressing it, and then I think it's going to come out somehow.
Somehow, yeah.
And I think it'll just manifest itself in some ugly forms. Like, maybe you're just being an asshole to somebody in a moment when, having, like, a reaction to somebody and saying, like, oh, shut up, and then, like, hurting their feelings.
Yeah.
And I think, too, like, then it questions, like, what is the intention behind doing the psychedelic experience in the first place? And, like, some people just use it as an escape, and they don't care what the experience is. That's why I'm using it more intentionally. Even if something bad comes up, you should really spend the time to try to unpack it a bit and say, okay, why did that come up? What did I have to learn from it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think they're, like, one of the ultimate forms of therapy.
Oh, yeah, that's without a doubt. And I think, well, what I think is important, too, is like, the way it's gaining such popularity now is that most people don't have an integration practice. They just hear that it's good. And people get relief or answers from just a psychedelic, but I think without proper support network of people you can talk to, or like professionals or people that maybe not people, but maybe more of an integration practice of your own where you can like, meditate and like, spend time to reflect on it. They're not as powerful as they would be in conjunction with like a routine, ritual, and integration.
I mean, I think one of the lessons I get increasingly from the psychedelic medicines is that, like, you are the medicine.
Absolutely.
It's not that substance.
Well, that's what I tell everyone. Like,
you.
Like, don't look outside yourself for anything. It's
Exactly.
a tool to give you more awareness about yourself.
Yeah.
So is breathwork. So is meditation.
Exactly.
So is, fasting. So is everything you do.
Yeah.
Your work environment. I think entrepreneurialism is one of the best, can be one of the best tools of personal growth. How you interact with your customers, your clients, yourself, the people around you, the decisions, how you market, your image, like everything, what you do when no one's looking.
Yeah.
And then when you go back and go through it, it's like, hey, there's so much to learn. Your attachments, the things you're afraid of.
Sure.
You know, sometimes you're afraid of losing money, sometimes you're afraid of what people are going to think of you. Like, there's so much you can unpack. And I realized that when I opened this place, you know, when I was under fear of like losing it all. I think I mentioned that earlier in the podcast. But yeah, that's I think the bottom line is that no one thing is an answer. It's all tools of awareness. I think that's what life is about: gaining more awareness and deeper understanding and learning. So talking about learning, I guess we'll shift gears to wrap it up here. What do you want to learn about? Like, what's next on Michael Sanders' radar? Is there anything you're curious about exploring? Whether it's learning something new or a new adventure, or what's on your radar for the next 12 months?
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, it pretty much all revolves around Horizon, like my company, and my personal relationships, mainly with my girlfriend and then with friends, you know, and myself, of course. And with Horizon, it's exploring this new dimension of reality that we're co-creating and how it will unfold. Because I'm so excited to see the applications and how we can help one another and help humanity and hopefully help the earth as well through these experiences. And I don't know exactly how it'll unfold, but what we want to do is show people that it can be fun. And these like esoteric concepts, complex ideas, they can be really enjoyable and beneficial. And so, yeah, as I mentioned, I don't think it's not just gaming, this new dimension. Like, it's a new dimension that's going to include commerce and relationships and exploration.
Well, we were talking about this earlier off the camera, that this new online thing is actually, you know, entering the matrix, where people can buy stuff online, create avatars, and eventually we're going to have virtual reality, and then eventually there's probably going to be a chip or a plug-in that goes into the back of our head, almost like the Matrix, where we're like in it, feeling and living it, which then what we talked about was makes us more believe that we're already in it right now. Yeah. And we should be creating another level of it, like Inception, like the movie Inception.
Or like Russian dolls that are stacked inside of one another and create another layer. And I think that's like a really cool aspect of this, what I like, because I consider three-dimensional experience on planet Earth like the most wonderful video game that exists, you know? And then I think it's like there's playing the game, kind of, and then there's creating a game that then goes beyond the game, right? And that's what I think the consciousness does, like layers and layers.
So traveling, friends, experiences. Okay, and I guess just in closing, maybe before we go, any recent movie or books that really inspired you, that you recommend in the last little while?
I actually recently watched this documentary about Taylor Swift, which I loved. I didn't know anything about her. Like, obviously I'd heard the name, but to my knowledge I'd never heard one of her songs. I'm sure I had somewhere, but I didn't know what they were. And she was just like a really inspiring and like down-to-earth human who's on this like massive stage in terms of fame, like how many people know her, and just kind of like the journey of her life and revealing the insecurities that she deals with, which, you know, I'm acutely aware of the fact that every human has issues, you know, so like I would have never thought that she's living a perfect life, that contemplation wouldn't have entered my awareness, but I love the way she's putting it out there, you know? I mean, I don't know if there's any propaganda involved in it, it's like part of something, I don't know, but it was like a cool, inspiring story about someone that I had no frame of, like I didn't have any preconceived notions about her to begin with, but just an inspiring story about like somebody coming up in the world and from a young age, and like this interesting phenomenon that seems to happen with a lot of celebrities, that there's this saying that if you become like extremely famous, you get stuck emotionally at the age you became famous at. So it's like if you get famous at the age of 15, like emotionally you're 15 until you have a massive breakthrough or like something happens. Or breakdown, right? So that was
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. I did not think that like someone asked me after this conversation, like, what's an inspiring documentary? It's one about Taylor Swift, but that's just what's at the top of my mind. Cool. That was really good, and I'm reading about Steve Jobs right now, his book, and he's like a very polarizing figure for many, but it's cool to see like someone executing a vision, and then also learning about maybe how you would go about it differently, but also seeing like the massive impact he had on the world, and just he was just like a really fascinating individual.
I think like I love the fact how transparent you are, because some people would feel maybe embarrassed, not the right word, but like not want to share like, I watched a Taylor Swift documentary or like Steve Jobs. But I think what's important is that like you can learn from every single human being on the planet, and it doesn't mean that you want to be like them or like their number one fan. Like I always reference this documentary that I watched on Donald Trump, which changed my life.
Nice.
And it wasn't like that I love Donald Trump or I hate Donald Trump. I'm pretty neutral towards Donald Trump. I think he said some pretty interesting things. I think we have a lot to learn from him. I think he's doing some things that are good, some things that are bad. I think like I don't even know how much of what he does is like staged and on purpose.
I have no idea.
But the one thing that stood out the most was I realized that no matter what was happening in his life, he had this like laser focus on like sticking with the vision. So like things are falling down, the 90s, the Trump thing, and people would ask him, he's like, no, it's going to be super successful. Like I really believe in what we're doing, and it's going to be a great success. And he would never waver. He would never say, oh, times are tough, or like the way he would talk and the way he would sort of execute like where he was going, he always stuck with it. All the way to becoming president. And I was like, wow, like there's something there. Like if I can use that same focus and determination on things that are like important to me, like what I'm trying to create here, it's like, wow, what a lesson. That was one of the turning points when like this place sort of shifted. It was like me watching a Donald Trump documentary. And like people in consciousness, you know, that are into like consciousness and awareness, spirituality, like most of them have very negative things to say about Donald Trump. So when I bring that up, they're like, what the fuck? Like they're shocked. But I'm like, I'm not saying I love Donald Trump. I learned something from him.
Definitely.
You know, and you can learn something from every single person. So thank you for sharing that. You know, I'm going to go watch the Taylor Swift documentary now, and I've been wanting to read more about Steve Jobs because I find him also super interesting.
Well, think about the influence he's had on this world. Like how many people are walking around with an Apple product of one form or another.
Changed the whole world forever.
How did he do? Or how did they do that?
The world will never be the same. He's one guy that definitely changed the world in a way that will never be the same. And I think a positive way.
Yeah, me too. Obviously, there's pros and cons to everything, right? But overall, I think he did something incredible and wonderful.
Last question: any apps or like gadgets or technology that you use to like optimize your time, your life, your functionality?
Well, I mean, Skybeamer, the game. In terms of, I guess, like, honestly, do not disturb
Like it.
on my phone is a big one. Like, I think having your phone on silent and on do not disturb.
So that's like when it's time to shut it off, it's off. Like, don't bother me.
Yeah, and, like, during the day when I'm focused on a particular task, to not get interrupted by something that isn't the task that I'm working on. And that's, you know, it's used at different times.
You read Deep Work by Cal Newport?
No.
Okay. It's a book all about that. It's really good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just because, like, you know, context switching there's a huge load that it takes on us.
The
like,
book talks all about like going deep and going shallow. You strain yourself to all these things, you cannot like really get that depth of focus into something.
I mean, there's some things, like, I'll know if I'm doing, just like as an example, doing budgeting planning, for example. It takes me like 30 minutes of just kind of like looking at the screen and like looking at the information before I do anything. Like, do anything.
And they talk about
because
that.
I'm just like processing.
I can't remember the exact word they use, but it's like there's like this integration period between tasks where your mind is still halfway in the other, and it's like you have to like there's a residue of like thought residue of like what you were thinking about. So imagine like you're trying to work on something in Facebook, and then this phone call, and then that like there's a residue from everywhere. It's just like how much focus do you have?
Exactly.
So that's a really good one, and it's simple. It's really simple. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
A couple more. I really like for Teams, for example. I like Notion.
It's like a Trello or like a.
No, it's kind of like a wiki. It's like a collective wiki that you can organize very well into different channels, and
everyone can collaborate on it together. So it's like a great central warehouse for all of a company's information, so that you can know anything about it. And then like I use a sauna for like tasks and time management, which I think is quite similar to Trello, at least conceptually. And then like Discord for communication. Discord is it's kind of like the gaming world's equivalent of Slack.
Okay.
But I think a lot of businesses are starting to go. I think Discord's better than Slack. Like it just is, and I think Discord will be like kind of what everybody ends up using, I imagine. So yeah, those tools as well.
And are you active on social media websites? If you want to get a hold of you, check out your book.
Yeah, just go to michaelsanders.co, and then that has links to everything else.
Blogs, yeah. Really interesting guy. Check him out. Love this guy. Became good friends. Probably been friends in past lives.
Definitely.
Probably be friends forever.
Yeah.
So check him out. He's a really good guy. And stay tuned for Skyweaver. Is there a launch date yet? You mentioned open beta.
Yeah, open beta will be later this year. Not going to give a date, but just skyweaver.net.
Yeah, so your name on the waiting list or newsletter or whatever.
Yeah, there's a waiting list to play. There's a private beta right now, so you can be one of the testers. It's a long waiting list, but like you definitely will get in at some point. And yeah,
cool. Check that out. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Subscribe, like, follow, share if you feel called to. If anything resonated in this podcast, anything we talked about, said, or did, look into it more. It means there's probably something there for you. It could have just been a spark of curiosity, a feeling in your heart. Maybe one of Michael's experiences that he shared in psychedelics. Who knows? But if you do, we're not promoting the use of psychedelics in any way. They're still legal in most countries, so err with caution. Go to a place like if you want to do ayahuasca, somewhere where it's legal. Psilocybin, or you can go to Jamaica. It's on TV and all these amazing TV shows that are talking about it. But do your research. Make sure it's safe for you. Do your due diligence. Don't listen to us. Some crazy psychonauts over here. But love you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you,
Thanks,
Michael.
everyone.
And
Thanks,
talk soon. Peace.